Today, we're going to protect your valuable n8n workflows by backing them up to GitHub. If you've ever spent hours building the perfect automation only to lose it to a server crash or accidental deletion, this tutorial is for you. In this first part of our two-part series, I'll show you how to set up automatic GitHub backups. In part 2, coming later this week, I'll walk through the restoration process. Let's dive in and make sure your automation work is never lost again. Don't lose your n8n workflows and credentials. Back them up to GitHub in a private repository for safekeeping. Also, if you ever decide to move your instance to a new provider, this will save you lots of work. In GitHub, I have a repository called n8n backups. And in here, you can see I've got two folders, credentials and workflows. And inside those folders on GitHub are all my workflows. As you can see here, this is the name that I've given it, and this is the name of the file itself. And then if we look back here under credentials, it's got all my credentials stored. And what triggers that is this n8n. This is one of the workflows. This is the one that backs up the workflows to GitHub. And then I've got another workflow that backs up the credentials to GitHub. So let's walk through how this works and how you can set it up yourself. So I've got a couple of links that I'll include in the description. This is the first one, back up your workflows to GitHub, created by Solomon. And we've got another one, back up your credentials to GitHub, also created by Solomon. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with workflows, and we're going to click on the Use for Free button. And when we do, we have different options here. If I click on that, it takes this workflow, puts it in my clipboard. And then if I go to n8n and I click on plus workflows to create a new workflow. And now that I'm in this new workflow, all I have to do is paste. And now that puts that workflow here. And then we'll do the same thing in a minute with the credentials workflow. But for right now, what I also want to do is give this a name. So I'm going to call it admin backup workflows to GitHub. And then I'm going to write demo on the end so I can remember to erase this or delete it when I'm done. And if you look here on the, there are some instructions here. And the first part is not so important, it's just for reference. But here it says for setup, we need to open the globals node and update these values below: the repo owner, repo name, and repo path. So if I go down here to the globals and I open that up, it's got some pre-filled responses. So I'm going to change the repo owner to my GitHub name. The name of the repo is going to be n8n backups, and we will just go ahead and put them in a workflows directory. So that's good. I can exit out of this. And then what else does it say we need to do? That's about it. But the only other thing, as you can see in this workflow, that we need to tend to, besides these globals, are this node here, n8n, and then the nodes for GitHub. So like get file data, edit existing file, create new file. You can see these little alert triangles that are saying something's amiss here, something needs to be done. So whenever you have a new templated workflow like this, you need to go into the node and make sure that it's connected with your credentials. So in this case, I already have credentials for n8n, but if you don't have n8n account credentials yet, what you can do is click this little drop down and say create new credential. And then what this is going to ask you for is an API key. And you can click on Open Docs to get information on how do you actually get this information to put in there in your API key. But I'll just show you how to do it. So if we back out of this and we go down to settings, Let me save that. Then if you look over here on the left-hand side, it says n8n API. I already have, this is the one that you saw earlier, but let's create an API key, and I'll call this demo. You might want to call it n8n, whatever you would like. And then you can say it has no expiration, and then you save it. I'm going to actually call this n8n API demo. I'm going to save it. Click to copy. I'm going to delete this API key after this video is recorded, so this will go away. Definitely don't ever share your API keys. Click done. Now back in our workflow, we're going to double click on n8n node, and we're going to choose create new credential, paste in that API key. And then under here, you see under the base URL, this is where you're going to need to put the URL for your instance. And then you're going to do /API/v1. So what I'm going to do is grab my instance name here. I just copied it from the URL. I'm going to paste it in. So it looks like that. So this will be the URL you access your n8n instance on, and then make sure it says /API/v1. And then when you hit save, it should turn green. There we go. Connection tested successfully. And we can close that. And now we're using those credentials for this step. And then the second thing, as I mentioned, are these 3 GitHub nodes. So forget file data. So what I'm going to do is open that up, and it's the same thing as the other step we just did, where right now I have this connected to my GitHub account. But if you don't have a GitHub account connection yet, you're going to need to create a new credential. And one thing in n8n you can do is it always has this little link here to the docs. And so if you click on that, it'll open up information on how to use GitHub in n8n. And under here, under credentials, it says refer to GitHub credentials for guidance on setting up authentication. So let me, I have that over here. And that basically walks you through how to do that. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to split my screen. You do that a lot with the Arc browser. It's quite handy. I'm going to pull up GitHub on the right-hand side here, and we're just going to follow these instructions. You'll come up here to your profile on the upper right-hand area, and you'll go to settings, and then you're going to go down to developer settings on the bottom left. You're going to choose personal access tokens and go for classic. And then you're going to generate a new token, classic. You're going to give it a name. So I'm going to say n8n demo and choose repo. Then at the bottom, generate token. And again, don't share this token with anybody. Right now, I'm going to copy it. I will delete this after the video is over. I copied that, copy that token, and then we can carry on. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to n8n. We're going to say create new credential. User, this would be your username. Access token is the one we just generated. And if I hit save now, it should turn green and the connection tested successfully. So we're all set there. Okay, so now this GitHub node we're using my credentials that I just created. And then I'll have to go over to the other nodes and make sure they're using the same credentials. You just choose it from the dropdown if you don't see it. And you notice the little alert goes away. And I'll do the same for this one here. GitHub account 2 looks good. And at this point, we've filled out the globals, and we filled out the globals node, and we filled out the GitHub nodes, as well as the n8n node here. So we should be set up for success with this. So what I'm going to do is hit save, and then we'll move on to the next step. Here we are in GitHub. And then under your repositories right now, I've got these, but you'll probably have, if you're new to GitHub, it's going to be empty. And what you want to do at this point is there's this green button here. It says new. You click on that and you want to give it the repository a name. And so now we gave it n8n backups, I believe. Now mine says it already exists because that's what I'm using for my actual live repo. So in this case, I'm just going to put demo, but that means I have to go back to n8n and update my global node to say n8n backups dash demo. So let's make sure n8n backups dash demo. There we go. And then the key here, make sure you make it private. You don't want anybody to have access to this information. And then click on create repository. So let's go back to n8n, run it by clicking execute workflow here. And let's see what happens. It's looping over the items. It says workflow executed successfully. Let's go check it out. Let's go to GitHub. We now have a folder called workflows. And if we open it up, there's all our workflows. So that's working. Now let's move on to credentials. For credentials, let's go to this page listed in the description of this video. Back up your credentials to GitHub. We're going to do very similar to what we did before. We're going to click on use for free. We're going to copy this template to the clipboard, go to n8n, create a new workflow, paste it in, give it a name, admin, backup credentials to GitHub. I'm going to write demo at the end. And just like before, our instructions are pretty much the same. We need to update the globals node with our repo information. And then we have to open up these GitHub nodes and make sure that our credentials are connected. So let's start with the globals. Repo owner, this is your GitHub username. The repo name we gave it was backups demo, and we'll put it in the credentials path. You can change that to whatever you want, but it makes sense to me to keep it with credentials. And now that we've got that, now we want to go to the GitHub. Let's open that up. And then it should automatically choose your credentials. And if it doesn't, you can just go down and manually choose it and then back out. And now the error goes away. Let's do the same for these other nodes. Just double click and open it. Looks good. Close it. Errors go away. Now, one thing about this template that I figured out was that this globals node is not connected to get file data node by default. So you're going to want to connect that. So just drag this over so that there's a connection there. And then let's save that. Let's go ahead and actually turn this on. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to test it out with the schedule trigger. When you hover over schedule trigger, execute workflow shows up. Let's click on that. And it's starting to go through the credentials. So let's wait until this is finished and then we'll go check our work in GitHub. The execution is finished. Let's go to GitHub, refresh. And there's our credentials folder. Let's open it up and there's all our credentials. So this is all working as expected. That's how you back up your n8n workflows to GitHub. And as long as they are active and you've set it up the way I showed you, this should schedule a trigger on the schedule trigger every hour. You can change that to however often you want. And you're now protected from losing any workflows or credentials. Stay tuned for part 2, where I'm going to show you how to restore those credentials. For instance, let's say you're moving for n8n from one instance to another, and you want to get up and running as quickly as possible. You're going to want to restore those credentials and those workflows to your new environment. Stay tuned for that.